So till now we have added some browser util methods, right, which help us to perform different actions on the application or browser. We have written some methods for browser driver and then for loading our configurations. So these are all the util methods. And apart from that, we have a base class, which basically decides which um, initializes the driver or closes the driver. Okay. Now coming to other util methods, right? So there will be some common util methods which you'll be adding, right? Like the properties util. So now we need a util method for our Excel files, right? So if you want to read or write into a particular Excel file for data-driven testing, you have to have a util method in your framework. Okay, so let's call it Excel utils. Okay, now what do we require? Um, so what we are going to use is we are going to use the Apache POI library, right, which is a common library used to read and write Excel files of with different versions of Excels, or you can say Microsoft Office Excel, right? So there is a dependency for that. So if you go to Maven and search for Apache POI, right? So you can see there are different versions. And let me make sure this is the right one. Okay. So we can pick up the latest one from here. This is the latest one. Okay. Update your form so that these are downloaded. Okay, now it is updated. There are some other libraries as well which you might require. One of them is so there is this OOXML. Okay, we'll see if it is required, we'll add it. But for now, just let's add this POI dependency. Now, once this is done, let's go back to our Excel utils, which we have created this class. Okay, so here we will have all the methods for our Excel. Okay, so how to interact with Excel. Okay, so we need to kind of create some instances for different classes. Okay, now there is this SSF, right? Workbook. This should be imported on its own. Okay, anyways, let's see. So what we are going to do here is first we will create a constructor, right? This cannot work without a Excel file, right? So we will accept a Excel file path here. So let's just keep it file path. So this is my constructor, okay? And this is used to initialize the objects which are required for this particular class, okay? Inside this, I will write the try catch block. Okay, and then I will try to read this file. So using file input stream, I will call it FIS null. I'm just creating an instance of the file input stream class, okay, which is the input output stream for Java. So inside this, I will call it FIS equals to new file input stream. I will pass the file path here, okay. It will throw some exception, so we need to catch it. We have seen this earlier as well in our other sessions. Then I will use the workbook to create a new instance of the workbook. Okay. And I will pass the file input stream object inside this workbook, which will create a new workbook instance. Okay. So this is my constructor, which will basically initialize the required objects for before you start interacting with all of the methods inside this class. Okay. Now, if you want to read data, okay, so we'll create a method for that. We'll create or we'll return a list of string for this particular method, and we will name it read Excel data. Okay. We'll pass the sheet name in this, and we'll pass the column name. Okay, these are the two parameters you need to pass: sheet name and column name. Then we'll call sheet equals to workbook dot get sheet. Let me try it again. Why it's not working? Updating the Maven project. Okay, so I can see the POI. We have got the HSSF. Or let me try the earlier version of this particular dependency, which I have worked upon. Not sure what has changed in 5.1, 5.0. Let me try the earlier version. Okay, I will check this, why this library is not getting imported. But let me write this method out. Okay. Anyways. So we have got the sheet name and column name, and then we need to get the sheet from the Excel. Okay. So once you get the workbook instance from the file, okay. So there are three things. There is the Excel file, there is the workbook, there is the sheet, right? And inside the sheet, you will have different columns and rows. Okay. So we need to use all of these in order to interact with your Excel sheet. So once you get the workbook instance, you can use the get sheet method, which is present in this library in order to get a particular sheet. Okay, and you need to pass the sheet name inside this. So that will return you the sheet. Okay, and this sheet is an object of the XSF sheet class. Okay, so right now it is not showing, that is the problem, but still I will continue. You need to create an object for this. Okay, so here we will store the sheet, and then we require the header row. Okay, so we'll call it header row equals sheet dot get row, and we'll pass the index, which is 0, which indicates that it is the first row. Okay, so we don't need to use this one. We'll use XSF row, and we'll create an object called header row. Okay, so this will return us the header row. And after this, right, we have got the sheet, we have got the header row. Now we want to know how many rows are present in that particular sheet, right? So for that, use something called row count. Okay, and we'll use the sheet object. There are methods like get last row number. Okay, so this will return you the last row number of your sheet, and you want to do a minus operation with the first row. Okay, so there is a method called first row number. So this will return you the total number of valid rows in your sheet, right? So use the get last row number method to get the last row number, and the get first row number to get the first row number, and then deduct the last row number minus the first row number to kind of get the row count, right? So the valid number of rows which are present. And you also need to initialize this, right? So int row count equals to 0. So once we get the row count, then we can use a for loop to iterate through all the rows, right? So we'll say j less than equals to row count. Okay, and iterate through each row inside your data sheet, right? Now, once you get into this iteration, you should point your pointer should be at the first row, right? So what we'll do is we'll say row equals to sheet dot get row of j, right? So that will point across each row in this particular iteration, okay, and store it in this row object type. And what is this row object type? So it's another kind of SSF row, right? So we'll create another object for this. Okay, so this will point out to each row in this sheet, right? Which we are iterating for all the rows. Now, after this, what we have to do is we have to get the last cell number, and we have to get the cell value of this particular row which we are iterating. Okay, so for that there will be different cells inside a particular row, so we need to iterate through each one of them. Okay, so we'll say this row dot, we'll say get last cell number. Okay, so this will return us the last cell number of this particular row, and we'll iterate through each of them. Inside this, we'll get all the values of each cell inside that particular row. Okay, so we'll say header row dot get cell of I, right? And we'll use another method called get string cell value. We'll use the trim method to trim any spaces which is present, and then equals column name dot trim. Okay, and if this is true, so we'll say column number equals to I. Okay, so what we are doing is we are iterating through each cell in that particular row. Okay, and we are then grabbing the header row which we have stored. Okay, we are getting its cell, so which is going through the iteration. We are getting the cell value using the get string cell value method. Right, we are trimming it. Then we are getting a condition dot equals, and we are using the column name, right? So column name dot trim. So this column name is this string column name which we are passing into this method. Okay, so let's have this column number. Okay, so we'll start from start. Start from 0. Okay, so after this for loop, after we find the column number, we'll say cell equals row. There is a get cell method, right? And we need to pass the column number in this particular method. And that is the reason we were trying to find the column number in this particular for loop. Okay, so once we get that, we can pass that in the get cell method in order to get that particular cell. Okay, so this will return you a cell object type. It's not actually the cell value. It is actually the cell object type, right? So this is again another type of class which is present in this particular library. So it is called accesses of cell. Okay, and you need to initialize that to null. Okay, so this will store the cell object. And once you get that cell object, right, you can get the string value of it. So you can say string value equals to cell dot get. There is a method called get string cell value. So that will return you the string value of that particular cell, which is the actual value. Okay. Now, what I can do is I can have a list of all these string values. Okay. I will call it column data, you can say, dot add of value, right? And this will be a list of all the column data values. Okay, so list of string column data, and we'll just initialize it to a array list. Okay, so that it is dynamic. There is no static size of this particular array list. Okay, so what it will do is this is inside the for loop again, right? So it will go through all the rows. It will get the particular column based on what column name you are passing, and it will grab all the values, add it into this particular column data, which is a list, right? And once you get this into a list, you can return this list from this method. Okay, so that way you can grab all the values which are present in a particular column. Similarly, you can use it as many number of times to get the values from all the columns, right? And then you can iterate through that list to kind of get all the values and use it in your scripts. Okay, so this is a kind of a reusable method. Right, so let me get this dependency correct so that I could run it and show it to you. Okay, so there was another dependency. I thought it is not required, but it seems it is required. Okay, so you need to add this dependency POI XML also along with the POI in order to get all these classes. Okay, so now I can import all these classes. Okay, so now all the errors are gone. Okay, let me try to get some Excel sheet here. Okay, so where we can store is okay, let's store it under the resources. So we'll call it test data. Uh, Let me create a folder here called test data. We'll add an Excel file here. Okay. So let me create a Excel. I will call it sample. Okay, so if I have something called username, password, Um, so something like this, right? So, and I will rename this to login. Okay, so we can have any number of columns, right? With a heading and then all the values inside these columns. Okay. Now, if I have to use this, let's save this and let's store it in our project. Okay, so it's under this data sample dot xlsx. Now, do remember that this is the latest format, and this is the format mostly used across all the Excel files. But if you come across the XLS files, which is the older version of the Excel, right? Then you need to use the different classes in your libraries. Okay, so this XSSF, right? This works with the XLSX files. Okay, for XLS, it is a different library. I mean, different classes which is present in this library in Apache POI. Okay, so if you're using that, then you have to use different classes for that. Okay, so let's see where we can use them. Okay, let me create a method here, something called get username. And here I want to call the Excel utils dot. Okay, so first we need to create an instance of it. So we'll call it Excel. And I need to pass the file path here. Okay. Now again, you can put it in a configuration file and get the path, right? But for now, I'll just use the fixed path for this. So I'll copy the path. Let's copy it from content root. Okay, and put it here. So this is the object. Okay, Excel utils. Now make it static. Now I can use the read Excel data, right? I need to pass the sheet name here. So sheet name is login and column name I will put is username. I think that's the, yeah. Okay, now I can store the values if there are multiple values in a list of string. Okay, that's the return type of this particular method. I will call it user names, right? This should return me all the usernames. Okay. Similarly, I can have for password. Just need to change the column name here. Instead of username, you'll use password. Okay. Now, what we can do, how we can use them, right? Yeah, obviously, you can use it based on your scenario, wherever you want to call this method, right? In order to get the username. Uh, okay, so here we are passing this as a parameter, which is the email. Okay, and that's the value. So if I want to use it, maybe instead of this particular method, I can directly call it inside it here. And then what I will do is I will say usernames dot get of 0, which will basically give me the first value out of that particular list, right? And let's also print it out so that we can see it. So I'll call it usernames dot get of 0. Okay, so this will now integrate into my feature and scenario. So because this method is being called, so inside this I have mentioned another method which will get me this values, right? And I can pass the same username here. Okay, so what I can do is I can call string user name equals to this. Okay, and then I can pass the username here. So this is one flow. I can use my Excel data instead of passing the static data, right? From either my scenario or from anywhere else or from the configuration files itself, right? So let's see if this works. Let's run this login.feature file. So if you had noticed, it is everywhere it is using that test at gmail.com, right? Because that is what I had mentioned in my Excel sheet, right? And obviously some scenarios would fail because test at gmail.com is not a valid username or email, right? But the purpose to run this was to show you whether it is actually grabbing the value from the Excel sheet rather than passing it from the configuration or from the scenario, right? So you can easily grab any particular value from your Excel sheet using this method. Obviously, you can tweak it little bit, right? Based upon how you want to use your Excel sheet, right? But this is a easy way of doing it, right? So based on the column header or the column name, grab all the values into a list, and then you can easily iterate through the list to get all the different values and use it in your tests. Just want to jump onto another topic which is not related to this, but it is also an important part of any framework which you build, right? Based on any tool or any test framework. Okay, especially when you are using Cucumber as a test framework. So in Cucumber, we have already seen um, the default HTML report, right? Now, reporting, as I said, I was saying this feature is also an important part of the framework, right? Which means I'm talking about reporting, right? Reporting is always a very important part of the framework because that is how you communicate your results to your stakeholders or to your team members, right? And it's very important because without the results, You cannot make sure whether your test has passed or failed, or there is no other way to track your execution, right? In different iterations. So reporting is always an important part of every framework, and you need to have different kinds of reporting based on your project requirements or based on what your team is following, right? So you need to follow that particular reporting structure, or any particular report you want to generate from your framework. Okay, so you need to give all the possibilities to your teams whenever you are designing a framework, so that they can work with all the different reporting formats, right? That's what I was speaking about. We have already seen the default report, right, which Cucumber provides, and this is the default report. Okay, it's a good enough report, but then it is only present inside the project, right? And obviously, you can still publish this if you are if you have already integrated it with this CI tool, then you can publish this HTML report as well, right? But it's still not that extensive. It is the default report which is provided by Cucumber, which we are using. Um, Obviously, there are other formats available with Cucumber, like the JSON, right? So you can do a few things with JSON, right? This is in the value of key value. Sorry, just updating in basically the key value format, right? So it gives you all the information about your results, right? And you can also build your own reports reading this JSON file. Okay, if you want any specific information like the duration, status, you can pick it from this JSON file. You have to write some logic in order to read a JSON file. But if you have that method, you can read it and you can grab all the different parts of this report and build your own report as well, right? But then that takes a little bit of time and effort, right, in order to build your own report. So for that purpose, there are different plugins which are available, right, which you can use with Cucumber in order to produce extensive reports. Okay, so one of them, which is quite popular and used across the industry, is the Maven Cucumber reporting plugin. Okay, so it has got a dependency and a plugin, right? It is an open source, and all the information is available on this particular GitHub page. Okay, so it basically runs with the Maven. Okay, it is a Maven plugin. So you have to define this plugin inside your project. And once you do that, when you run it as a Maven project, it is going to produce extensive reports in the HTML format, right? So, I mean, I use it for every Cucumber project I'm working on because it gives me different view of my test results. Okay, there are some pie charts, there are tables. So on top of the default Cucumber report, this is a good extension to your reporting. Okay, so it's pretty easy to configure. You just need to add this plugin into your project. Okay, so if you go to pom.xml, so till now we haven't added any plugins, right? So under build, okay, so there is already build. So under build, you need to add this particular plugin. Okay, it has already got its dependency in this format, right? And you need to add the version here. So let's check out the version. So latest is 5.5.4. And let's put it here. Okay, let's update the project. Okay, while it is updating, let's go through some of the information which is provided in this plugin. Okay, now there is this execution phase. Okay, and this execution, it ties this plugin to a specific phase. Okay, so it will not execute if you run a compile phase. It will only execute when you run a verify phase. Okay, inside the goals, that is this generate goal, which generates the HTML report. But the important thing to note here is the phase, which is the verify phase. So you have to run MVN and then the verify phase. If you just run the MVN compile or test, it won't generate the reports. Okay, so you always have to include the verify phase in your Maven test execution. Okay, so now coming to configuration, right? So these are the dependencies and the executions, but then there is a configuration where you can mention your own project name, right? So our project name could be Selenium Cucumber Framework. So this will be displayed at the top of the project. Okay, this project name. Now skip, you can also skip whether if you don't want to generate this report, you can make this configuration as true and it will skip all this reporting in your project. Okay, so coming to the output directory. Okay, so by default it is project build directory. Okay, so it will be generated inside this project build directory, which is fine, right? And then the input directory, which means this, as I was talking about the JSON report, right? So this plugin works on that particular JSON report. Okay, so if that JSON report is generated, then only it is going to basically put it as the input file. Okay, and it will read that JSON file and then produce this report based on that JSON file which you have generated. Okay, so that's the input directory which is talking about, right? If both these are optional, right? So if you don't specify, it will default to output directory. And this is the JSON files, right? It supports the wildcards. So basically, this is the directory path of your JSON file. Right now, it's under my target directory, right? This JSON file. So it is star star slash star, which means one level down. Okay. From the top, there is this subdirectory, which it will try to find this JSON file. Okay. Now there are some other things like classification directory, but this will anyways default to the output directory. Okay. So you don't need to care about these. So classification files, parallel testing, right? For now it is false. Merge features by ID false, right? If merge features by with retest, check build result. Okay, so this check build result. Okay, if you set it to true, it will fail the build on test failures. Okay, if you set it to false, it will not fail the build. Okay, so depends how you want to have this plugin working in your CI tool, right? If you want to fail the build, if this test fails, then you can put it to true. Otherwise, leave it as false. So, so this is the basic configuration. The most important part is if you want to change your output directory, you can change it, right? And the JSON file. So if it is located somewhere else, you need to put the right path in here, right? So these are the two most important things. Rest of the configuration is pretty much default, or you can call it optional, right? So it will default it to specific directories if you have not specified it. But these two things you need to specify them. Okay, so once done, right? So why this is not updated? Just a minute, let me check. Okay, maybe it is looking for the Surefire plugin, which is not present. Okay, let me try and run this and see. Now, as I said, you cannot directly run it from a feature file. Then this particular report won't be generated because it is a Maven plugin. So you need to execute your project as a Maven. Okay, and how you can do that, I have already shown you. Go to your project, which is a Maven project already, right? So let's go to CD idea projects. And now we will run some Maven commands. As I said, it should include the verify phase, right? So I mentioned two phases, clean and verify. So it will clean the project and it will run the verify phase. Okay, so it will run all the tests, which I should not be doing, but anyways, let it run. Okay, let me run some test which is passing so that I can make sure that this plugin is working. Let's keep it email for now so that this passes. Let me rerun this. Okay, and let's go to test runner and just configure this particular feature file to run. Okay, so it is already mentioned as login.feature, so that should only run login.feature. Okay, let's see now. Okay, all the tests are passing, but I think it is failing on the build because this plugin is still not working. Okay. Um, it is also telling me that it is not able to find JSON target slash JSON reports does not exist. Okay. So what I can do here is instead of this, let me pass it as the build directory, not JSON reports, because that's not where it is trying to find, right? Try and run this again. There is some additional configuration which is causing the problem, which is the classification directory which I mentioned. So let me remove all this configurations which we are not using, right? So yeah, so we are not using all of this. Okay, so we got a build success. So don't worry about this. This seems to be an IntelliJ problem since I'm running it from the command prompt. This plugin worked correctly. Okay. And as you can see, these are the two plugin phases, right? So it ran the Maven jar plugin and it ran the Cucumber reporting generate, right? Which generates the reports by parsing the JSON file, okay, from the cucumber.json.